because the president of the United States, he just pardoned Juan Hernandez, who was convicted by an American jury, who's the former president of Honduras. Okay? He was indicted and convicted by an American jury. And he was convicted of moving over 400 tons of cocaine into the United States of America. And the president said, go free, my brother, go free. So that's not about drugs. It's not necessarily about regime change either. I think people are missing the mark because Maduro's entire team is still there. His military is still there. It's his vice president. So it's not about freeing Venezuelans, because if you wanted to do that, then you actually would put in a new government. You would install a new government. Or better yet, you would install the opposition leader, which he chose not to do. This is about one thing and one thing only, which is why your comparison is accurate and it strikes a chord with the American people. This is about oil.
In today's video, Bakari Sellers exposes and destroys the MAGA narrative on Newsnight with Abby Phillip. 1 minute Trump is basically implying the US is running Venezuela. The next minute officials are backpedaling like, no, not like that. And when foreign policy looks that sloppy and impulsive, it stops being strategy and starts being a dangerous gamble. So yeah, this debate isn't just political, it's about whether America is repeating the same mistakes with a new target. And trust me, the tension in this segment is unreal. So let's watch how Bakari Sellers shuts down MAGA on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
The president says he's running the country. Marco Rubio says, actually, no, we're not. We're just giving guidance and hoping that they go along based on the threat of military action. Then it's a question of, is it about the oil, as Trump says? Or is it about all those other things? And if it were about democracy, where's the democracy? Does this make any sense to you, Congressman?
Abby, no, it doesn't. I am haunted by the ghosts of Iraq and Afghanistan here, where we spent 20 years, trillions of dollars, thousands of American lives, decades of lost credibility. And the American people have had enough with interventions like this. They've had enough of nation building. They've had enough of focusing on things other than the cost of living, the cost of housing, the cost of health care. Nothing that happened this past weekend is making the lives of Americans better, right? And if you want to talk about drugs, which is a huge problem, by the way, a huge problem, it's devastating and it's destroying our communities and our children. It's fentanyl that's largely driving that, not cocaine largely, but fentanyl. And fentanyl does not come from Venezuela.
Yeah, I think it's obvious that the administration is talking out of both sides of its mouth. If the Secretary of State says we're not running it, and the UN ambassador says we're not running it, and then the president says we are running it, obviously they're not on the same page. And so the fact that we've taken this very risky, very aggressive move to arrest a foreign leader and then determine that it's our job to determine the political and economic future of this country with 0 people on the ground and we can't even get our story straight is not a good sign. We're in day 3 of this thing, and it's a total mess. Okay, and anyone who's being honest has got to admit that it's a total mess. And the hypocrisy is obvious, because if he says it's about law enforcement, then why are the ships still there? Because we already got the guy. And if he says it's about oil, well, we don't use our military to grab oil from countries. We don't use our military to settle disputes. And by the way, it's not our oil. It's their oil. Okay, it's the Venezuelans' oil. And if they violated a contract, then that's not what the U.S. military is for.
Let me just
so it's kind of a disaster, to be honest.
Let me play a little bit more of Trump, because, I mean, this is part of a pattern of Trump really not taking anything off the table, even while his aides might be trying to do that on the side over there. Here's what he said on Sunday about whether he's willing to put boots on the ground again in Venezuela.
I always say boots on the ground. So we're not afraid of boots on the ground if we have to have. We had boots on the ground last night at a very high level, actually. We're not afraid of it. We don't mind saying it, but we're going to make sure that that country is run properly.
Batya, I just wonder, first of all, A, how is he going to make sure that the country is, quote unquote, run properly? And B, is that now on the table, boots on the ground in Venezuela again, beyond just the operation to get Maduro out?
It's very funny to me because it seems like you guys are acting like because a simple operation that was very successful could have accomplished many goals, therefore it couldn't have accomplished any of them. I say this with all due respect, sir. I'm so grateful to you for the service you've provided to this country. But Venezuela is not Afghanistan. 25 years ago, there was a functioning democracy there. It's just apples and oranges to compare it. There is no way Donald Trump is going to put boots on the ground there. That's what the ships are there for, to not have to do that.
Jason Crow and Josh Rogin are basically ringing the alarm bell on something that should be obvious to anyone who remembers the last 2 decades when the US starts talking about guidance, boots on the ground, and making sure a country is run properly. That's not some harmless rhetoric. That's the exact language that's been used to sell Americans on interventions that spiral into chaos. And it's not even paranoia. We've literally seen the playbook before. Quick mission, limited scope, stability, and then suddenly you're years deep, spending obscene amounts of money, losing credibility, and creating power vacuums that make everything worse. And what makes this Venezuela situation extra messy is the contradiction problem. If the administration can't even keep a consistent story for 48 hours, is it oil, drugs, democracy, or just Trump's ego flex? Then why should anyone trust them to manage something as complicated as the political future of another country? That's not nitpicking. Operational confusion is exactly how you end up with mission creep. When leadership doesn't have a clear objective, the military becomes the tool that gets used to patch over political indecision, and that's when bad decisions multiply. Also, the "this isn't Afghanistan" argument doesn't land the way Batya thinks it does. Iraq wasn't supposed to be Iraq either, until it was. Libya wasn't supposed to collapse either, until it did. The question isn't, is Venezuela identical to past failures? The question is whether the incentives and the arrogance are the same, and they are. When leaders start talking like they can engineer another nation's stability from the outside, especially while admitting they don't even have people on the ground, that's not confidence, that's delusion. And Jason Crow's point about fentanyl matters more than people want to admit, because fentanyl is the actual driver of overdose deaths right now. If the goal was truly saving American lives from narcotics, you'd be seeing policy focused on supply chains, precursor chemicals, ports of entry, and domestic treatment funding, not speeches about taking their oil and rebuilding another country's infrastructure with US companies.
What they're doing right now is beyond brilliant, because instead of rushing in and appointing Maria Machado, for example, they're saying, let's wait and see where the Venezuelan people are at. Let's wait until we can have an election. You can't just do that overnight. And so they are sitting there and watching and calibrating and making sure, by the way, that the Venezuelan people, as well as now the new president, understand that whatever they do, this better be good for the United States, because we're not afraid to use our power anymore.
Trump doesn't care what the Venezuelan people think.
We actually had an election, they had an election in Venezuela, so that's a moot talking point. And let's just tick down the list real quick so we're very clear about it. This isn't about drugs, because the President of the United States, he just pardoned Juan Hernandez, who was convicted by an American jury, who's the former president of Honduras, okay? He was indicted and convicted by an American jury, and he was convicted of moving over 400 tons of cocaine into the United States of America. And the president said, go free, my brother, go free. So that's not about drugs. It's not necessarily about regime change either. I think people are missing the mark, because Maduro's entire team is still there. His military is still there. It's his vice president. So it's not about freeing Venezuelans, because if you wanted to do that, then you actually would put in a new government. You would install a new government. Or better yet, you would install the opposition leader, which he chose not to do. This is about one thing and one thing only, which is why your comparison is accurate and it strikes a chord with the American people. This is about oil. This is about oil and dollars. And I'm tired of the president of the United States. He chooses Caracas over rural health hospitals, right? He chooses Venezuelans over soybean farmers.
So,
he chooses everybody else over Americans.
Did you oppose the Biden administration putting a bounty on Maduro's head as well?
No, Maduro's a horrible person. He needs to be shackled.
But what does
So Trump just acted on it.
Exactly. What do you mean that you approve of Biden putting the bounty on his head, but not of Trump actually going out and arresting the guy?
There are vastly, those are diametrically opposed. First of all, I don't think anybody here is trumpeting that Maduro's a great person. If you are, raise your hand. See, the table is silent. So that's first. He's oppressive. He deserves to be behind bars. I'm not arguing that point. But what I am arguing is that what we did was ill-advised on the global scale. There are other ways to go about doing that. And I am tired of America, just like many people on the left and the right, believing that we can go in and just implement our free will, utilize resources, utilize American troops, implement regime change or whatever it may be, and now we're doing it over and over again for oil. Don't lie to me.
No troops suffered as a result of this operation.
No, several troops were injured, first of all. Many troops were injured.
American troops were
all
in all unscathed.
They were injured.
What this is, it's not about oil, to your point.
Many U.S. troops were injured.
That's a side story. Although I do find it rich that progressives keep saying that this insinuation that we're going to seize their oil, because I didn't
That's
hear
what Trump said.
I bristle, by the way.
I didn't hear a peep
Listen,
about the oil.
I don't think it would be on the table if the president hadn't put it on the table.
And what is seize the
First off, the idea that you can park ships off a country's coast, threaten we're not afraid to use our power, and call it waiting for the Venezuelan people is kind of insulting. If you actually cared about Venezuelans leading their own future, you'd be talking about legitimate international mediation, independent election monitoring, protecting civil society, and building conditions where people can vote without intimidation, not flexing military hardware like it's a negotiation tactic. Historically, when the US calibrates with gunboats nearby, it doesn't produce democracy. It produces resentment, instability, and a backlash that hardliners use to tighten their grip. And Bakari's point about the motive being oil, that's not some conspiracy. It's literally written into decades of US behavior in Latin America. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves, and American administrations of both parties have been tempted by the idea of a friendly Caracas that opens the taps for US companies. The problem is, when oil becomes the prize, human rights becomes the excuse, not the mission. Also, the "it's about drugs" talking point is weak on its face. The deadliest drug crisis in the US right now is fentanyl, and that supply chain is tied to precursors, ports, and trafficking routes, not Maduro. If Washington wanted to actually reduce overdose deaths, it would be laser focused on prevention, treatment access, and disrupting fentanyl networks, not staging a geopolitical stunt that risks escalation. And here's what really gets me. Even if you hate Maduro, and most people do, grabbing a foreign leader like this without a coherent plan creates a vacuum. We've seen that movie. Removing the head doesn't magically reform the system, especially when the security apparatus, the generals, and the corruption networks are still intact. That's how you end up trading one strongman for another, while the country stays broken.
oil mean? It means we force them to give American oil companies preferential treatment. That's what seize the oil means, because oil is traded on international markets by corporations. So what Trump is going to do is he's going to pick and choose American corporations that get beneficial rights in Venezuela, and he's going to do that by threatening to kill the new leader of Venezuela, who's a Maduro apparatchik, by the way. His right-hand man.
Yes, but Trump is exercising.
And that's a huge opportunity
Trump
for
Trump is exercising.
Apparatchik.
Okay.
Also a
But
hand.
again, Maduro's
Joke
deputy.
writing.
Hold on one second.
Slower.
One second, guys.
The point is
let me
that
let Caroline.
You know what? Okay, can I just say
Hold on.
something?
Let me let Caroline finish her thought.
There's one word that was not mentioned anywhere, which is strategic deterrence. It's a phrase, actually, 2 words. And what this was not about oil. It wasn't about drugs. That's all side stories. It was another show, masterfully, of Trump basically showing that he can keep Iran and Russia and China and all of our adversaries at bay. He shows that he wasn't bluffing. It wasn't empty saber rattling.
The opposite
is going to happen, because what clearly happened on Saturday was a message was sent, the strongmen and autocrats and dictators and our adversaries around the world, that says if you have a big army and you have a weak neighbor, or you want something from another country, you can go and take it. And nobody's going to stop you. America's not going to stop you. The rules-based order that we erected for 80 years after World War II is no longer going to stop you. It is a much more dangerous world.
So is it your position that our foreign foes should expand their foothold in South America? Is that your position?
What's crazy?
Because what Trump did was basically said, look,
what's
guys,
actually going to happen,
you
though,
actually can't expand your influence over this region.
I don't think that's the proper extrapolation that he's making. And I don't mean to speak for you, Congressman, but what we are saying is that things like China and Taiwan, for example, what is to prevent that from just going off the rails now? or Russia and Vladimir Zelensky.
What do you mean?
He's undermined the idea that big countries shouldn't be able to trample on small countries because we're a big country.
Correct.
We just trample
That's
on
right.
small
A small country with an illegitimate leader
Anyone
whose
can say
citizens are
anything.
now erupting into cheers because
so
they
your theory of
ousted.
the
My theory
case
of the
is that
case-
China was sitting there and thinking, should I take Taiwan? Oh no, I won't take Taiwan because I never saw Trump go in there and arrest a guy who was flooding the United States with drugs and illegals and
no,
gang
well, I
members.
would put it this
but
way.
now that he's done that,
I'm saying-
we're going to take
You
over.
honestly arguing that
once
our
had a claim-
enemies are now in
I'm saying
power?
we once had a claim to the moral high
10%
ground,
of their
and now we
oil.
don't.
Our adversaries are howling exactly the way that you
I
are.
disagree.
Russia and
Yeah.
China and Iran are howling
I disagree.
because they
Hold on,
lost
guys, hold on.
access to their
They didn't
oil.
actually lose it, but what
Hold
you're
on.
saying is not true because they actually still have the access. And there's no reason to believe that Trump schemed the way he thinks it's
You
going to
can't
play out
have it
that way.
both ways, that he's both giving preferential
You're
treatment to
underestimating him
American
again.
oil
No, I'm
companies
saying he's trying
and
to-
China
Well, hold
still
on,
has
he's-
access
hold on,
to the
hold on,
oil.
hold on.
Trying to
Guys,
steal the oil, but he's not going to
Batya and Josh.
work.
What Josh is getting at here is the part that always makes my stomach drop. The second you start treating another country like a problem to manage instead of a sovereign nation, you're basically ripping a page straight out of the playbook Americans swore we were done with after Iraq and Afghanistan. Because let's be real, if the president is openly talking about taking or seizing Venezuela's oil, that's not some harmless metaphor. In practice, that means using US power to tilt contracts, access, and leverage toward American companies, whether it's through sanctions, military pressure, or a new government that conveniently signs the right deals. That's exactly why even UN human rights experts have warned that threats of armed force and coercive intervention violate the UN Charter and basic non-intervention rules. And the strategic deterrence argument sounds strong until you think about what it signals globally. If the US can snatch a leader and start dictating a country's political and economic future, you're not deterring strongmen. You're normalizing the idea that big powers can rewrite borders and governments when it suits them. That's the nightmare scenario for places like Taiwan, the Baltics, and basically any smaller state living next to a giant. Josh is right. It undercuts the rules-based order more than it projects strength. Also, the "this isn't about oil" defense collapses when the operation is consistently framed around oil exports, tanker seizures, and control over production. Even some recent assessments describe the seizure and pressure campaign as a strategy to choke Venezuela's oil sector and shape what comes next. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.